There's a town in Texas where the ground is literally caving in and nobody seems to be able to stop it. Welcome to Wink and Kermit, Texas, two tiny towns way out in the Permian Basin. Population, just a few thousand. Vibes, a mix between an old western and a disaster movie. Because beneath these sleepy communities, the ground is unstable, dangerously unstable. And the wild part? This has been going on since the 1980s, maybe earlier, and it's only getting worse. So how exactly does a town just start sinking? Why are there giant sinkholes opening up in the middle of nowhere, Texas? And why hasn't anyone fixed it yet? Let's break it down, because this story involves oil tycoons, collapsing highways, abandoned buildings, and some of the weirdest land movement in the country. Wink and Kermit sit on top of one of the richest oil fields in America, the Permian Basin. Since the 1920s, this land has been pumped, drilled, and tapped for every last drop of crude. By the 1980s, companies had poked so many holes in the ground you could almost call it geological Swiss cheese. And when the oil was gone, they didn't exactly reinforce those empty caverns. They just left them there. Now picture this. You drain massive underground reservoirs that were once filled with liquid. Then over time, the rock above starts to shift and settle. Eventually, gravity wins, and the surface starts to sink. This is called subsidence, and in Texas, it's not just a theory. In 1980, a massive sinkhole opened up just outside of Wink. It was the size of a football field. Then in 2002, another one appeared a mile away, even bigger. It swallowed a pasture and came dangerously close to nearby oil equipment. Today, both of those craters are still there. Locals call them Wink Sink 1 and Wink Sink 2, which sounds cute until you realize they're up to 100 feet deep and still shifting. And yes, geologists think more sinkholes could appear at any time. In fact, satellite data from the last decade shows that large swaths of Wink and neighboring Kermit are still sinking. Not dramatically, not all at once, but just enough to make you question whether the road you're driving on is stable. Here's the kicker. Wink and Kermit aren't abandoned ghost towns. People still live there. There are houses, schools, grocery stores. It's not some remote wasteland. But if you talk to the residents, a lot of them are nervous. Some homeowners have cracks in their walls that weren't there last year. Others have noticed doors that suddenly won't close. Foundations are shifting. Roads are buckling. It's subtle, sure, but it's real. And while no major injuries have happened yet, the potential for disaster is very, very real. In 2016, researchers at SMU, Southern Methodist University, did a full-on geological survey of the area using satellite imaging. What they found was terrifying. They discovered that several areas around Wink and Kermit were sinking at rates of up to 5 inches per year. Even worse, some spots weren't just sinking, they were shifting sideways too, which means that not only is the land unstable, but it's also unpredictable. You could reinforce one area, only to have the collapse shift half a mile down the road. So why doesn't the state of Texas step in? Or the federal government? Well, that's complicated. Most of the land around Wink and Kermit is privately owned. That includes the land with the worst sinkhole activity. And because the problem is technically caused by decades-old oil and gas activity, nobody wants to foot the bill. Oil companies? They're long gone. Or they've merged, changed names, or disappeared into the corporate abyss. So instead of action, residents get warnings. The Texas Department of Transportation has shut down roads near the sinkholes. Some areas are fenced off, but long-term fixes? Not happening. What's it like to live next to a literal hole in the earth? Well, it's kind of like living near a volcano, except slower and drier. People in Wink and Kermit go about their lives, but they know the ground could collapse without warning. There are rumors, stories of animals disappearing into crevices, tales of heavy equipment just vanishing into the ground overnight. Are they all true? Maybe not. But enough weird stuff has happened that no one really laughs when those stories come up anymore. Here's the twist. Sinkholes aren't just a Wink and Kermit thing. All across Texas, there are areas of unstable land tied to oil and gas activity. From Odessa to Monahans to Pecos, the land has been poked, drained, and destabilized for a century. There's even a notorious sinkhole in Diceta, Texas that opened up in 2008 and again in 2023. It swallowed cars, trees, and part of a road. Locals call it the sinkhole that eats itself. So Wink and Kermit, they're just the most visible example. But this problem is spreading. The scary part is, no one really knows. You can't exactly fill in an underground cavern the size of a football stadium, and even if you could, the cost would be astronomical. For now, the best researchers can do is monitor. They use satellites, ground sensors, and aerial surveys to watch for changes. They try to predict where the next sinkhole might open up, but it's like trying to guess when an old building will collapse. You know it's coming, you just don't know when. Here's the most ironic part. Wink, Texas is the hometown of Roy Orbison. That's right, Pretty Woman himself. He grew up here, went to school here, and made it big. But now, his childhood town is literally collapsing under its own weight. There's a statue of him downtown, a tiny museum. And just a few miles away, a giant sinkhole that's still growing. It's almost poetic in a really dark, Texas kind of way. Wink and Kermit are more than just strange names on a map. They're a cautionary tale, a reminder that the Earth remembers everything we do to it, even if it takes a few decades to respond. So the next time you're driving through West Texas and see a random fenced-off field in the middle of nowhere, you might want to slow down, because there's a good chance the ground beneath it isn't all there anymore. If you found this story wild, bizarre, or just a little unsettling, go ahead and hit that follow. We've got more strange places and forgotten towns coming your way. And next time someone says Texas is boring, just show them Wink Sink number 2.